Don't be afraid. After the darkness is light. So don't you be afraid. When it comes the long night. Long night. Have faith, journey along. If you don't know, the path is long. But if you try, you'll surely grow to heal past the sorrow that been keeping you low. You low, so grow, 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 grow. You got to grow, 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 grow. Even if you're wrong, you're wrong. Even if you can't find your way. Even if the journey is cold. Believe in love today. And I know that you will grow day by day. If you walk with love, you'll never be astray. Just grow, grow.
Shalom, Chag Sameach to my Mishpachah family. Thank you all for joining us during this Shavuot experience. It has been such a blessing to have a double portion of Father Yahweh's Moedim, which is appointed times. And I pray and I receive, actually, that is accurate, his love and his presence and his awesomeness in the final hour of both Shabbat and Shavuot in the year of 5786. I am starting off this portion of our final section, which is one last word of revelation. And I'm here to briefly just share an experience of mine. And I hope that you all also have experiences that Yahweh has revealed to you throughout this Shavuot experience. And this is basically unscripted, so bear with me as Yahweh fills me and allows me to vocalize and express what he has put up on my spirit. I was briefly speaking with Shalomia, or Bia Shalomia, or as my mother would say, baby Rabia. And we were talking about camping. And I know in a previous broadcast, Yafaya Bat Yahweh was talking about some things that people do on Shavuot. And I know a lot of people camp during Sukkot, which is a fall moed, but also camping is pretty prevalent and becoming a newer thing that people also do during Shavuot because we learn about Shavuot in Bereshit, excuse me, in Bamidbar. Um, and we learn that Father Yahweh blesses us while we are in the wilderness, as Shalomia often says, on the way. And I said Bamidbar, but it's Devarim. Wait, no, Bamidbar. I was correct. Excuse me, in the wilderness. And what Father Yahweh blessed upon my soul and my spirit at this time was talking about a camping experience, reflecting back on what Yafaya Bat Yahweh was mentioning during, if you joined us during the Shavuot-a-thon on the first day of Shavuot. This is a common thing that people are now starting to do because it is a reflection of also being in the wilderness during this time. And Father Yahweh was telling me and Shalomia, we were discussing that camping and Shavuot have their similarities, and there's a lot of things that we can learn about Shavuot as it relates to a camping experience. And what was placed upon my soul is that is so true and that is so accurate. And I wanted to share a few things that I initially thought of as it relates to camping and the Shavuot experience. The first thing being that we do a lot of planning in life. So the first thing is the plan. So we plan out all the things that we need to bring. In my case, all the things that I need to borrow from my cousin to bring on the camping experience because I haven't been camping in over 10 years. And you pack a tent and chairs and blankets and sleeping bags and put things in an ice chest, and you're thinking about all the meals to prepare. And the planning part is so important in a lot of our minds because we don't want to be unprepared. We want to have a blessed camping experience. And in our minds, in order to have an amazing camping experience where we're not hot, we're not cold, we're not hungry, we're not thirsty, we do a lot of preparation, we do a lot of planning. And that reminded me of also the plan and the preparation that leads up to the Shavuot experience, which is what we were doing for 49 days, starting after the second day of Pesach, or starting on the second day after Pesach, which is the 49 days, the building, the growing, and the Sephirot of Father Yahweh, his Chesed, his Geburah, his Tiferet, his Netzach, his Hod, his Yasod, and his Malkut. And so a lot of preparation happens during the planning phase. The next thing that Yahweh blessed upon me is then there's the reality. The reality is that no amount of preparation, no amount of items on a checklist will fully be enough to be 100% prepared. Everyone always says you'll inevitably forget something. You have to be prepared to an extent because things just don't go as we planned. It's not that they're going wrong, quote unquote. That's how it might be perceived, but we looked at the weather or the forecast a week in advance and it said it was going to be sunny and perfect weather, and you might get there and it might start raining. You picked a campsite that you thought was going to be amazing. It's next to the water, but you might have accidentally put your tent on top of an anthill. And so what Father Yahweh is teaching us is that there's our plan and there's Yahweh's plan, which is the reality of the experience, that you are in the wilderness and that there are going to be things that you are going to experience that you didn't 100% prepare for. But what Yahweh has blessed us with by going through this 49-day journey is that you learned all of these characteristics of Father Yahweh so that when the inevitable thing happens that wasn't on your list, wasn't on your checklist, wasn't a part of the plan, Father Yahweh teaches you that you need to have compassion with yourself. You need to be balanced. You need to have discipline. You need to grow. You need to endure. These are some of the attributes that we learn during the counting of the Omer. And so there's this preparation phase, there's this plan, And then there's the reality, the experience that we're actually going through. And I know, even reading the Aseret HaDebrot, commonly known as the Ten Commandments, they seem so simple. Let me actually read them off to you in a simplistic form. The first one, you shall have no other gods or mighty ones before me. You shall not make for yourself any graven image or idol. You shall not take the name of Yahweh your mighty one in vain. Remember the Shabbat day and keep it set apart, Kadosh. Honor your father and your mother. You shall not murder. You shall not commit adultery. You shall not steal. You shall not bear false witness against your neighbor. You shall not covet anything that belongs to your neighbor. These are the list and categories that Yahweh has given us as human beings in order to be in right ruling, to stand before Yahweh and to be righteous in his eyes. But what we know is that we often fall short, just like the reality of the camping experience. We try so hard not to put other mighty ones before Yahweh, but then we put fear in our bosses. We get fear of being fired and or unemployed. We fear those things sometimes more than we fear Father Yahweh. We put fear that our car may break down. We put fear in our finances. I don't have enough money. My credit card bills are getting high. We put fear in so many other things than trusting and believing in Yahweh, because Yahweh, as my mom always says, doesn't give us more than we can bear, doesn't give us more than we can handle. So if you trust in Yahweh, then who are we to fear anything else or anyone else? And so the reality of the camping experience is you must trust in Yahweh to get you through it. And what better way to do that when you can't, get on LinkedIn and try to find another job, or, you can't change the weather. You might be able to move your tent over, but you can't change the elements. You can't change nature. And so what Yahweh is saying, instead of trying to change everything and to put your control on circumstances and situations, trust Father Yahweh that He will get you through. And it starts with a mindset. It starts with those characteristics that we've been building. It takes patience, it takes time, it takes understanding, it takes endurance and perseverance, and Yahweh will get you through. So I see, the preparation phase is number one, and how it relates to the counting of the Omer and the Shavuot experience, as well as the reality, which is the midst they had left they the Israelites had left Mitzrayim, and they're on this journey to receiving the Aseret HaDebrot, and things that they didn't expect to happen happened, and they were growing and learning to accept it because their eyes were set before Yahweh. And then lastly, I also think of the reflection period. And we're going to do a lot of that as Shavuot comes to a close, which is reflecting on what the journey taught you, what the experience taught you, the memories you built along the way, and how you continue. We don't just stop building in these ways that Yahweh is allowing us to grow in. He expects us to continue. Um, if it was your goal, if you set certain goals and did certain things during the counting of the Omer because you wanted to fully embody chesed shebe chesed, which is overflowing loving kindness, and you decided, hey, to really embody this characteristic, I'm going to volunteer for a day. I'm going to go to my kids' classroom and I'm going to ask the teacher if they need anything, because that's how I am embodying overflowing loving kindness. Well, it doesn't just stop. You don't just do it that one time in the year. Figure out how you can incorporate chesed be chesed, if not daily, then weekly, if not weekly, then monthly. The reflection period is really important because we also learn in ways in which we miss the mark. I pray that all of us counted the Omer every night, but if we didn't, and if we didn't practice that attribute and strengthen ourselves in that way, I pray that Father Yahweh now blesses us with the opportunity to reflect. In business, they often call it an after action review, recognizing that nothing we do is perfect. And an after action review, for example, is something you do with an activity or an event or a process. And I'll give an example. For example, let's use the camping experience since that's right there. I was going to use an event as an example, but let's use the camping experience. You realize that You created this checklist and you said, I'm going to have a tent, I'm going to have some towels, I'm going to have some pillows. And then you have the reality of the experience, which is maybe you didn't have enough pillows, maybe you didn't have enough towels. Maybe instead of worrying so much about one thing, you didn't realize that you forgot to bring hand soap to wash your hands. An after action review or that reflection period is you sitting alone or with others who experience the experience with you. And you're saying, hey, the next time we go camping, these are some of the things that we forgot to do or we didn't plan for. Let's make sure the next time we do something like this that we're thinking about that and that these things are also on our list. And so the reflection period, which is what we're going to be entering into within the next hour or so, is also really important. There's the plan, there's the reality, but there's the reflection as well. If we weren't able to fully grow in the way that we could have during this 49-day period because we were experiencing grief, or there was something really heavy on our heart that it was very hard for us to get over and we couldn't fully embody that attribute, or we realized, we really need to know more about what NETSOC feels like, what perseverance looks like, what endurance is supposed to teach us, then that reflection period equals us implementing ways and thinking about ways we can enhance that attribute in the year 5786 and for the rest of our lives. We're not perfect. We do all things through Yahshua who strengthens us. We're never alone. And we have the ultimate teacher, the ultimate helper, which is Yahshua. And so during this reflection period, I pray that we have compassion for ourselves and recognizing that we got through this journey, but also recognizing that this journey doesn't stop, because that's what Hasatan, the adversary, which is what Hasatan means, wants us to believe. He wants us to go back to our old ways. They often say it takes 90 days to build a habit. Well, I think Yahweh's teaching us that it really takes 49 days. And to keep that habit, we just have to keep going. And so that is what I wanted to share with everyone. My one last word of revelation that Yahweh has placed upon my heart as it relates to the camping experience as well as Shavuot. The first one being the preparation and the plan. The second one being the reality, understanding what actually happens. And the last one being reflecting, and reflecting on those experiences and probably doing an after action review. And then lastly, I think what Yahweh teaches us with camping is we're not in control of anything. We think we're in control. It's a quote that says, when we plan, Yahweh laughs. We can do our best to try to continue to live daily a lifestyle that is pleasing to Father Yahweh, but Yahweh is the only one who knows the ultimate purpose of our lives. And we are here to fulfill that mission. And in order to receive revelation about what that mission is, if we're confused about it, or if we are not sure what it is, Yahweh wants us to get into our prayer closet or our praise sessions with Him so that He can reveal that to us. And as Shalomia once mentioned, I think it was during last week's Shabbat, you're not going to know unless you ask Father Yahweh. And so it's not just moving day to day and trying to figure out what we're supposed to be doing. That is a piece of it, but it's also asking Father Yahweh, Yahweh, what do you want me to do today so that I can fulfill my mission here on this earth, which is why you placed me here. And Yahweh will reveal that to you. Sometimes we might see it as resting and resting our body or healing our body, nourishing our body with healthy foods, taking care of a loved one, being with family, being with community, building our family, building our community, teaching His Torah, helping those that are less fortunate, comforting a widow, feeding the hungry, giving company to strangers. And so I pray that Father Yahweh allows for us to realize that we control nothing. Everything is in His hands, And we are here as vessels so that he fills us through Ruach HaKodesh, his spirit, so that we can move in a way that is pleasing and righteous to him. Thank you so much for allowing me to share with you this experience that hopefully I will be experiencing. I'm trying to also set my own soul into a way or set my soul right so that I'm going to be camping next week or in a couple of days. And so I pray that Father Yahweh blesses me with the strength to get through it by putting Him first and by knowing that through this experience, there's something that He wants to reveal to me. I also wanted to lastly share that there's this beautiful prayer by Rabbi Nachman, which Shalomia often mentions, that we say while we're in nature. I just wanted to read it to you so you can understand how beautiful it is. It says, "Grant me the ability to be alone. May it be my custom to go outdoors each day among the trees and grass, among all growing things, and there may I be alone and enter into prayer, to talk with the one to whom I belong. May I express there everything in my heart, and may all the foliage, yes, of the field, all grasses, trees, and plants, awake at my coming, to send the powers of their life into the words of my prayer, so that my prayer and speech are made whole through the life and spirit of all growing things, which are made as one by their transcendent source, Yahweh. May I then pour out the words of my heart before your presence like water, O Yahweh, and lift up my hands to you in worship on my behalf and that of my children. Amen. There are
Um,
also three, Amen. There are also, lastly, three prayers that we can recite when going out. The first one is, we praise you, Yahweh, sovereign King of the universe, who makes the works of creation. The next one is, we praise you, Yahweh, sovereign King of the universe, that such as these are in your world. And this is when we see small scale wonders of nature, such as beautiful trees, animals, and people. And the last one is on seeing a rainbow. We praise you, Yahweh, sovereign King of the universe, who remembers, is faithful to, and fulfills your covenant with the promise to creation. And we will be, I know sometimes when we're in our houses, it's hard for us to realize that we are just one bit of creation, an important bit of that creation, but also Yahweh has created the trees, He's created the soil, He's created the ants and the bees and the butterflies and the waters. And when you're one with that creation, you're being one with Yahweh because Yahweh is in all of us. And so I pray that you received this message, and I will be passing it back to Shalomia.
Amen. Thank you, Miriam,
Amen.
Ahavia. I that was beautiful, and I just have a couple of things that came to my spirit as you were uh, as speaking about how the camping experience um, mirrors this journey that we're on, and you know, uh, I, I see it as I think the first thing you mentioned was preparation, and uh, the preparation piece. I think you are absolutely correct, and about what it means to prepare, and that even though you do prepare, you have to be ready to. And I'm just going to cap it in the language that we talked about during the Omer, which is what does it mean to be fully alive, fully human? It means that, and I think the quote that we've been using is the academic the academic. Wait, what is the quote? Um, I don't know what the full quote is, but I just know that the end of it is that the mystic experiences things, right? Meaning to be fully human, you have to experience life. You have to experience it in its fullness. Um, and so you can prepare, but you have to be ready to be surprised, which is the part of the experience that is of Yahweh's doing, right? He wants to see that we are prepared because that tells us we're ready for the journey. And he wants us to make sure our expectations are just set in one mode, which is trust in him. And so it's like removing all the other expectations about what it's supposed to be. Expect to trust in Yahweh, and that's it. All the worldly expectations bring down to nothing. And then that then says, when those surprises do come about, you are saying, wow, thank you, Father Yahweh. I was ready for it because I trusted in you. And so it's like preparation helps you, yes, but also is a signal to Yahweh that you're ready. And it's, the other end is when the surprises happen, know that it's Yahweh saying, you're fully alive and you can handle it because I know you prepared and to go along for the journey. The only other piece is about the camping is when the people of Israel arrived, it says that they arrived in the wilderness, and that they encamped in the wilderness. And then it says, and he encamped there opposite the mountain, meaning it went from it went from plural, that they all arrived there, to singular, meaning it's just one, oneness. And we've talked about that as oneness being they were all on the same wavelength, the same page. There was cohesion, unity, etc. But in your experience, I would just offer that it also means that you are going to have a twofold experience, right? You're going to have your moments where it's supposed to be singular and just about you communicating with Yahweh, Yahweh communicating with you. And so reserve time for just you. And then we gather from the they arrived there that, of course, even if you're not going camping, even if you're going camping by yourself, right? What this is telling us is be prepared to also embrace those that are also at the mountain, whether that be the people that you go with, the people that are going to be there inevitably because people get the message to go and camp and they arrive there. So you may arrive by yourself, end up seeing other people, embrace those other people because it's twofold. Be by yourself, communicate with Yahweh, pray, receive, and then also try and be in unity and in oneness and gather together with the people who you either go with there, and there's going to be something special about the relationships that are formed and the fellowship that is had, or the ones that you meet there if you've gone by yourself. That's all I got.
I mean, if I was on the other side of this YouTube, I would be sending heart emojis. So thank you for sharing.
No, thank you for listening to Father Yahweh. I mean, you've had the camping idea well before Shavuot started, which goes to show you how the Spirit of Yahweh has been moving upon you, and so you've been encamped at the mountain already, quite literally, and you're just taking what you've built already from Shavuot and you're bringing it to the mountain. But you've already been on the mountain in your camp. I'm saying this jokingly because you've actually had the camp set up, the tent set up with all the camping materials. And so it's like Yahweh had you do this so that your tent, quite literally, could be infused with the Malchut of Yahweh here on this mountain, so that you can now take what has been filled up by Yahweh's presence on Shavuot, that dwelling place that you've already built and set up, and now you're taking it and you're bringing shalom to the mountain. You're bringing love to the mountain. You're bringing what you've been poured in with in this appointed time with Yahweh. And so Yahweh's going to fill this trip up with even more of a blessing because you've allowed him to pour into you. You've received it. Now you're taking it to the mountain to, of course, receive more. But first, he's going to give you opportunities to pour out what you've just received here. And then he's going to pour back into you. And then you're going to be ready to come back. So all in all, it's going to be a blessed trip. And Praise Father Yahweh that he allows for real life connections to where we are in the Torah to manifest itself, which goes to show us that the Torah is not a uh, a book of randomness. It is a book that sets the wavelengths and the energy for the weeks and the months that we're in. And this is a moment where we're in the desert camping, and Yahweh put upon your spirit to do just that. That's not a coincidence. And so you're taking the mantle, you're taking the baton from Yahweh Kodesh, and you're running with it. So praise Father Yahweh. Enjoy.
Amen. Thank you, Shalomia.
You're welcome. And I think I'll continue in that concept. Actually, it's talking about passing the baton. It's a good place to continue where Ahavia just left off. This is billed as one last word of revelation. And it's kind of a misnomer because, of course, there's not one last word of revelation before the gates of Shavuot close. But it is to say that, I did not think that I would have anything else to share on this Moed, meaning I had passed things over to Yafaya and Yahuditia. They were delivering the message, and I went to a park to study. And as I was listening to I had a whole nother plan. So obviously talking about preparation. I had a whole other plan to go into a direction that I was ready to go in. I was like, okay, great. I'm going to have time to build up this bigger message that I've been working on. And so I brought all my books and notebooks for that. And as I'm sitting in the park, I'm listening to Yafaya and Yahuditia, and Yahweh's spirit says, okay, well, good job. You were prepared, but ha 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 ha, meaning Yahweh laughs when we plan. Not as in you didn't do the right thing, but ha ha, I'm going to move you in a different direction. So quite literally to what Ahavia just mentioned, planning shows something, but we can't be so tethered to it that we can't readjust, because all you see in Torah is people readjusting over and over and over, people showing that they're flexible over and over and over, not to random people, but to Yahweh's will, because Yahweh's will moves, it changes, it flows. Quite literally, a flow is not one directional, meaning a flow, it depends on what certain people do in terms of walking through portals. And it might be planned in a certain way, but if certain things don't actually get there, well, then certain portals close and other ones open. And then as the conduits of Yahweh's will, we have to be willing to adjust in the same way that the flow has adjusted in the world, meaning nothing is set in stone. That is not the way the world works. There is no one plan that has no what's the word? It starts with the V, variance. Maybe it's variance. Anyways, it's like there are different versions of the same plan, right? It all still leads to Yahweh's will, but because we have free will, because we have free will, you have to then just imagine, well, if we have free will and Yahweh has given this to us, but he's guiding things as a shepherd guides sheep, right? But if you've ever watched a shepherd guide sheep, there tend to be, you can set off on, let the sheep out, and the shepherd's in the back watching to see where things go. But you always find that there are sheep who drift off, right? So even though there's a shepherd there to guide the sheep that drift off, well, then you got to plan for that and adjust for the sheep that drifted off and still get them back over. So that might mean I got to delay, got to make sure that the sheep in the front are sort of put on hold while I come gather the ones in the back that veered off, and then I got to get them back. And if you just imagine that process, well, that's what Yahweh has to do. And that is what flow means. And so I was planning on a thing, Javi is planning on a thing with this camping experience. And quite literally, I did have to readjust today because I was listening to Yafaya and Yahuditya, and my spirit said, a portal has just opened. They have both talked about something during their message that Yahweh wanted me to continue exploring, and I was elated about the change. I didn't get to what I went for, but I got to what Yahweh wanted, which is to take the baton that Yafaya and Yahuditya put down, and I want to just continue going down a direction that they were going down in their blessed message about the book of Ruth. They did a fantastic job, and there were two moments in particular that, one from Yafaya, one from Yahuditya, that spoke to my spirit and that I want to elaborate on. The first was Yafaya, and she, and Yahweh does this thing with me where it's there are the moments that seemingly mean nothing, mean like they're nothing, or that are, where there's maybe nothing to pick up there. And those are always the moments that he says, oh yeah, that's exactly the thing that you should be focused on. And so with Yafaya, she mentioned at the beginning, very quick in passing, she said, my husband said that, as she's, I guess, preparing to do the message, she tells her husband says, is this the long one, or this is the long one, right? In terms of the long moed, right? As in, he is connecting the counting of the Omer, which is the 49 days. And he's saying, oh, this comes on the tail end of that, as in Shavuot is the 50th day. And she says this comment, and it's super quick. And Yahweh said, pick up on that. And he then had me thinking about the Moedim, right? The appointed times of Yahweh. He had me explore it in a much more expansive way. What we know about the Sephirot, right, which are the 7 characteristics and attributes that we focused on during the counting of the Omer, all 49 days, each week having a attribute. These attributes are not random. If you ask the question, what does it mean to be like Yahweh? What does it mean to operate like Yahweh? What does it mean to operate in the image and likeness of Yahweh, which is our purpose here on earth? Then Torah describes exactly what that means from an ethical standpoint, from a behavioral standpoint, from a characteristic standpoint. How do you alter your personality to what Yahweh looks like? Right. Over the 7 weeks, we go through the 7 qualities, we go through the 7 attributes. And if you look at those attributes, of course, they fit onto the image that they fit over is, we call it the tree of life. And the tree of life has 3 columns, right? So it is a system. So when we talk about systems, any computer has there's a operating system that it runs off of, right? So if a computer has an operating system, then so does the world, right? The world has a operating system. Yahweh's kingdom has a operating system. Yahweh himself has an operating system. I mean, it is mostly mysterious and secret on purpose, but he gives his sons and daughters, those tapped into him, the ability to become in his image and likeness, which means there's got to be some way that he tells us and opens up to us about what that operating system is. All right, well, it is the tree of life, also known as the Sephirot, also known as the kingdom of Yahweh. But this tree of life three-branch system, meaning there's something on the left side, there's something on the right side, and there's something in the middle, right? There's a characteristic that is on the left side, middle, right side. And you might think, well, what can I think about to gravitate toward what you're saying? And then I would respond, the human body. Okay. If you look at your body, you've got a right side and a left side and a middle. You've got a right arm and a left arm, and you got something in the middle. You've got a left leg and a right leg and something in the middle. And so Yahweh has quite literally not only made us in his image and likeness in terms of his our internal behaviors, characteristics, attributes. Well, he's saying I also imaged it that way in terms of your body. Now Yahweh doesn't have a body, but I'm talking about it just in terms of the physical system. We can think about it as a body externally as well as internally. And so, how in Hebraic thought that we understand the three columns is there's one that is long, one that is short, and one that is mediating in between them. What is the long side? The long side, the expansive side, that's the right pillar. So think right hand, right leg, right foot, anything on the right side, right ear, anything that's on the right side. That is long, meaning it's expansive, it's overflowing, meaning it is you going outward, right? And then there is one that is short. The short is contracting. That is the left pillar, right? That is about restraining. That is about turning inward. That is about self-accounting. Think left arm, left leg, etc. And then the mediating, one mediating in between, that is the middle. That's the bridge, right? That is the holding the two sides together, holding what is seemingly a contradiction, holding what is opposite each other, trying to balance those two things in the middle. Right? You might start thinking about the body parts that are in the middle, and I'd argue your heart is in the middle, right? It's certainly in between the right arm and the left arm, right? I'd argue your sexual reproductive systems are in the middle, right? I'd argue your torso is in the middle. So just to think about the body parts that align with this, and then you can go deeper and see how they function. You'll see they align perfectly with what I'm saying, right? The heart has to mediate because it has to give blood everywhere. It can't just focus on one side. It has to give blood everywhere, and it has to regulate that blood, right? And so you can get the picture. So one long, expansive, one short, contracting, one mediating, the bridge, the middle, the harmony. That is how the three column system is set up. So week one of chesed is expansive, it's long. Why? Well, chesed is overflowing loving kindness. So what is that? That is literally the overpouring. You're expanding, you're going outward. You are showing and shining your light and your love into the world, into communities. You are literally doing what we learned from Avraham, right? Avraham is known as, and Sarah, Avraham and Sarah are known as the mother and father of overflowing loving kindness. Why? Well, because they literally are the two that decided to gravitate toward Yahweh, take their households with them, leave somewhere and go elsewhere. And they didn't do it on their own. Again, they did it and they brought folks along. They were seeking out Yahweh, right? We know them to be the people that are very hospitable, right? And so when you're hospitable, when you're doing things for other people, charity and abundance, right? Coming in to help people in abundance, you're just someone who's a giver. That is what we're talking about with long. And it's long because it's what Yahweh says the world that he's built everything on. The foundation of everything is his overflowing kindness. It's why he's allowed the world to endure and be so long, even though he has every reason to, if he wanted to, end it, make it short, meaning we are not deserving of his kindness, but yet we have it. And you can think about people who give, and they give to people who don't deserve it, but they're doing it because they're full of something that overflows. All right. The short, the left side is called Gevurah. We see that in the second week. Gevurah is about learning how to restrain yourself. It's about learning how to to do self accounting and also take self accountability. It's to look at who you are now, looking at where you want to be, understanding your gaps. So it's a self accounting process. It's about turning inward. It's about restraining your mouth, right? So if someone with chesed talks a lot, someone with Gevarah is going to talk a little because yourself, you know how to guard your mouth. Not to say that everything you're going to say is bad, but when you are when you are someone who is turning inward and you're restraining yourself, well, you're doing it because in order for you to think about who you are and who you've become and how you want to grow and all of these things, you can't be so focused outwardly, right? And so you quite literally have got to go into yourself, remove yourself from people, kind of seclude yourself, go into exile, if you will. You can't be available for everyone. So you don't have much to say because you're trying to keep restrained so you can use your energy to focus on becoming something else. That is short, right? It is short because we aren't too much gevurah, or excuse me, too much gevurah you can become harsh, right? Too much. This is also known as the judgment sephirah, right? Too much of self accountability means that you will become too harsh on yourself. So you can either become too harsh on others, too harsh on yourself, too judgmental of others, too judgmental of yourself. Restraining means you're not you're not doing, you're holding back, meaning you're stopped. Well, we don't see too many places in Torah where we do that, right? We literally learn to walk in the image and likeness of Yahweh. So we're supposed to be moving, but sometimes we do need to restrain, but it's not supposed to be for long periods. It's supposed to be short. And then mediating. That one's pretty obvious. Okay. Well, if this is the way that we know the system of Yahweh works, well, then it maps onto many things. One of the things it maps onto that I hadn't really thought about until Yafaya mentioned this thing earlier about her husband saying, is this the long one, right? And you'll always find Yahweh in these small moments that are seemingly that mean nothing, which is why he always points me there, because he's saying, you think that was a random thing, huh? You think that small little thing was random? It's not, right? Just like in the Hebrew Aleph Beit, the Yod is the smallest letter. So you could think that small little letter is nothing, huh? But it's actually the most powerful of all of them. Hence why Yahweh and Yahshua and Yahuwah Kodesh begin with a Yod. So he points us into the small things, but you have to be able to pick it up because it's always going to be there. But yes, this small thing that Yafaya said had me think, the festival cycle must map onto the Sephirot. Because Yohanathan, Yafaya's husband, said it's long. And he was absolutely correct after I looked at it, right? So I just want to go through what those are for you. We'll talk about them more at length some other time, but I just mapped them out in the way that I've mapped them out. So expansive, right? Right column, right pillar. What are the expansive right pillar overflowing outward festivals in the what are I'm calling them festivals, but they're the set apart. They're the appointed times where we gather with Yahweh, meet with Yahweh. So what are the expansive right pillar ones? These are the ones that are the pilgrimages. These are the harvest moments, right? These are the turning outward to the world moments. So the first one is Pesach, right? It is long and expansive because we see that to be redeemed from Yahweh, Yahweh had to do what? Yahweh had to, he redeemed us with an outstretched arm, right? In some places, I think it actually says the right arm. He redeemed us with his right arm, right? Outstretched arm, right arm, reaching down to liberate, right? Pure, that is pure overflowing loving kindness. And it's the opening act of the whole redemption story. We've talked about it at length, so this one should be, obvious at this point. But that Pesach absolutely means it's chesed, right? In terms of the appointed time. What do? We have a seder. We have we drink the 4 cups. We retell the Exodus, right? We search for, remove the chametz, etc. The second one that's on the right side is Shavuot, which is why Yefaiah's husband Yohanatan was absolutely correct. Shavuot is on the right side. It is expansive. It is Yahweh doing, once again, something that is overflowing in kindness and in love. He is giving us, right, the Torah. He is giving us revelation. It is revelation from Yahweh flowing outward, and it is coming toward us. It is a nation accepting something, right? It is a community gathered together to accept something. So Yahweh is flowing in stretching out and in moving outward to give us revelation knowledge, but it's not I mean, it describes us as one people, echad, as we accept it, but that is accepting it. We're accepting it as a nation, right? A nation described as one, but it's still a nation. It's a community. We're all encamped at the Mount of Sinai. And we also know it as all of the things that are expansive in terms of what we read. The book of Ruth is quite literally a story of an account of, you can see all of them, but mainly we're talking about things on the right side. The right side of the Sephirot are what we are reading and understanding in, for example, the book of Ruth, when Yahweh is giving the Aseret Hadibrot, the 10 statements. He's not giving it to each person individually. They're understanding things differently and seeing things differently. He's giving it to everyone, to each at their own measure, but giving it to everyone, meaning what you can understand and perceive is what you get, right? Even though we all get have no other gods before you, well, you might be on the level, a really high level with that, or a really low level with that in terms of understanding it, but it's still the same one, different understanding. That the 10 statements, commonly known as the 10 commandments, that is being received by everyone, and we are known to have said, we will do, we will observe, we together, right? That is also chesed. And then we've got Sukkot. Sukkot also, and by the way, we know Pesach and Sukkot are both a week long, right? So they're long, certainly in terms of the amount of time, the days that exist. And then Shavuot, one might think, oh, well, that doesn't really fit this long concept, but it does, because if you read in Torah, I think in Leviticus, Vayikra, it describes Pesach, it describes the counting of the Omer, and then the feast, excuse me, the counting of the Omer as the Feast of Weeks, if I'm not mistaken. And then it describes Shavuot as the Feast of First Fruits, right? But it doesn't really do a good job separating them as if they're their own things. It has an and between the two, as if there's a natural progression, there's a continuation. So when you think about it in that way, it's also long. But with Sukkot, we're doing something very similar to hold on. We're doing something very similar to Shavuot, sorry, because Shavuot, people are in tents, encamped, right? Sukkot, people are in tents, encamped. The meanings might be a little different, but they are literally both about tents. My sister mentioned the other day that my Rabia on one of the messages during Shavuot, he kept saying and mixing up Shavuot and Sukkot. He kept mixing them up, and she texted me and she said, LOL, he's doing that and he thinks it's an accident, but it's actually just the spirit telling him that they're related, and they absolutely are. Not only in the fact that both are about encampments and tents, as we read, but both are about gathering in the world, as in we learned that Shavuot is about that all the souls, right? All souls were at Mount Sinai. Rabia talked about it as in the quiver of every man were all of humanity, right? I mean, that's the way ancestry works. So if you think about that being the beginning of everyone that will eventually be grafted into Israel at Mount Sinai, well, that means everyone that's there inside of them, right? The men in particular, in their quiver, they hold all of the future generations. That's one way to think about it. Others have said it just means all souls were there, whether or not they were in the human body or whether or not they were there externally, or excuse me, there just in spirit form, everyone was there. But what I'm getting at is there was a gathering in of people outside of our quote unquote faith system in both of those festivals, Shavuot and Sukkot. On the contracting left side, you've got unleavened bread. These are the days of restraint, of affliction, of self-accounting, right? Going inward, that's the Feast of Unleavened Bread, right? That is constraining yourself, only eating the bread of affliction. And I should say just to make sure that everybody understands this, Pesach and the Feast of Unleavened Bread are actually two different moeds in Torah. The first night is Pesach. The remainder is the Feast of Unleavened Bread. This is why they're separated. But like Shavuot and the counting of the Omer, you can see how they're connected. With the Rosh Hashanah, of course, that's the day of judgment, the day that we are self-examining, right, and taking account. And then Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement. You can all obviously see how that is, an inward day. We're talking about the sealing of our judgment. It's also about being private, you and Yahweh. It's about severity, judgment, and the sealing of what came about on Rosh Hashanah. So all three of those are about left pillar, Gevurah. And then we've got mediating. That is things that bridge these two together, right? So if the middle is the things that harmonize, well, what does that look like for the festivals? Well, that is the Omer itself, right? The Omer is the bridge between Pesach and Shavuot, quite literally, in the middle. It is the Shemoni Aseret, the 8th day of assembly, plus Simchat Torah, That's mediating. It's the intimate 8th day beyond the 7 days of Sukkot, right? Where Yahweh is asking Israel to linger one more day. It's the quiet gathering, and then it's the first fruits, which is the waving of the sheaf offering. This is done on the one day of Shavuot, and it's also the bridge between redemption and revelation, right? So this cycle that I put together from that one moment that Yafaya mentioned it in the broadcast, it tells us that when we really map it out, it gives us an idea of how things work in the system of Yahweh, right? It opens up with expansiveness. That's the springtime, right? Pesach pours redemption outward. We know Pesach is actually the beginning of the year spiritually, and now this just confirms it, right? Because it is long. It's chesed. It is a moment of expansiveness, and so that's where things start, right? Redemption outward, and then the counting of the Omer becomes the ladder, climbing up to Shavuot, where the Torah is given to all the world. And so it is a season. The springtime is a season of giving and ascending. It is a season of the soul refining itself week by week in order to receive. And then we've got the contracting, we've got the discipline, the unleavened bread, right? The 7 days of constraint means that we got to make sure that we are not becoming too puffy, right? We are making sure that we afflict ourselves so that we know Yahweh is what guides, leads, and directs and protects us. And then in the autumn, the movement reverses and turns inward. Rosh Hashanah, judgment. It is making sure that we understand that, like Sukkot, we are drawing the nations in, right? We are bringing them in, just like we are going inwards. We're bringing the other nations into our tents and to the tent of Yahweh. You'll notice that the same 7 Sephirot appear sort of twice in this structure, right? We'll talk more about that, but the concept of this is really, you can think about a breath. How do you take breath? You inhale, right? You inhale outward, you exhale inward, and then you reset in the middle, and then that just happens over and over and over again, right? When I say you inhale outward, meaning you taking in breath when you inhale, right? You're inhaling, but you're bringing things that were outward and you're bringing them in, you're exhaling, and that is part of the cycle. And then, again, the middle is you holding and restraining, which is Geburah. The next thing that I wanted to talk about is what Yahuditya mentioned, also a small moment during the account of Ruth. And she says it was a moment where she talked about there being an unknown man in the account of Ruth. And, they both pause and they look at their notes, and then they keep going, and they're like, yeah, it was unnamed man, and they continue with their teaching. Well, that is where my spirit said, pay attention to that. That's important. And immediately when they said it, it reminded me, when Yafaya said it, Yahuditya said it, it reminded me of the place in Bereshit where Yosef had left his house and he was going to search for his brothers. And you would miss this if you're not paying attention, right? Because it's just a random little thing, right? Like the Yod, random little thing. You could miss it if you're not paying attention. And in this moment of Yosef going out, and Torah says that he's lost. And there's a unnamed man, and that unnamed man, he says, Yosef asks him, do you know where my brothers are? And the unnamed man says, oh yeah, they went over there. points him in the right direction. And that's it. We don't hear from him anymore. And so when Yahudita mentioned it, that's what I thought of. And that's when I when I knew, okay, there's something much greater here. And what Yahweh poured into me was about what does it mean for there to be a closed door and an open door, right? Meaning, at these various points in scripture, we see unnamed people. They appear and they do the one thing that the account needs, that the story needs, and then they vanish. It's like in this one moment they appear. It's crucial. It's crucial, but it can look unhelpful, right? The act can actually look unhelpful and sometimes even harmful. But if you look at everything from the end and then trace it back to that point, what is revealed is that it is the very hand of redemption. And so when we look at both in the account of Yosef, the man that helped him, and in Ruth, the one who is more related, the near kinsman, those two figures rhyme almost perfectly. But one is opening a door. One is opening a door by pointing down the road. That's in the account with Yosef. He's actually pointing down the road. And then the other one is closing a door by stepping aside. And so you might not think that they are the same, cut from the same cloth, or two sides of the same coin, but they are. They're just doing it. They're just doing the work of the door, just on opposite ends, right? One is addition and the other is subtraction. One is an open hand and the other is a closed hand. They both turn and point toward deliverance, right, in some way. And so I was left asking, if an open door and a closed door can both direct you in the same place, well, are they both still a door? And the answer is yes. And, a door in Hebrew is known as a dalet. It is numerically, it is number 4 in the Hebrew Aleph Beit, right? So we know that a letter has a number and meanings behind it, right? And so number 4 is also represented by dalet. And so when we look at Bereshit, Genesis, let's look at Bereshit, Genesis 37:15 through 17. And what we see is it says in 37, we'll start at verse 12. It says, now his brothers went to pasture their father's flock in Shechem, and Israel said to Yosef, your brothers are pasturing in Shechem, are they not? Come, I will send you to them. He said to them, here I am. And he said to him, go now, look into the welfare of your brothers and the welfare of the flock, and bring me back word. So he sent him from the depth of Hebron, and he arrived at Shechem. Verse 15, it says, a man discovered him, and behold, he was blundering or lost in the field. The man asked him, saying, what do you seek? And he answered, my brothers do I seek. Tell me, please, where they are pasturing. The man said, they have journeyed on from here, for I heard them saying, let us go to Dothan. So Joseph went after his brothers and found them at Dothan. Okay, that's the man that we're talking about, the unknown man. But what's important about it is what we see next. It says, his brothers saw Joseph from afar, And when he had not yet approached them, they conspired against him to kill him. And they said to one another, look, that dreamer is coming, right? So now come and let us kill him. What do we learn from this? This is the moment where, of course, this man who's unnamed points Yosef toward his brothers, gives them the directions, and following that, Yosef is thrown into a pit. His brothers nearly kill him. They abandon him. He then goes down to Egypt, and we can think about this immediately as, well, that man, that man or that door that that Yosef walked through was unhelpful and literally ended up having him arrive in the pit and in servitude and losing everything. All right. But what do we see though? Eventually, we see eventually it is from there that he gets into a position from which he preserves his whole family through the famine. And he preserves the world through his role as a viceroy in Mitzrayim. Right? He tells his family after they apologize at the end of this account, you know, he's there, the brothers are apologizing profusely. He says, Yahweh did send me before you to preserve life. So we learn this man, unidentified, points in a direction, meaning it is a door that is open, right? The man points in this direction, and it looks like he sends this boy, Yosef, 17 at the time, into harm. But he actually sets the rescue of a nation in motion. We then have in Ruth, right? Ruth 4:1-8. We heard this earlier. Ruth, it says, chapter 4, verse 1-8. I'm just going to actually read it. Verse 3. It says, then he said to the Redeemer. The Redeemer is the individual who is unnamed, as in that's not his actual name. That's just what the text refers to him as. He says to the Redeemer, the parcel of land which belonged to our brother is being offered for sale by Naomi, who has returned from the fields of Moab. I resolved that I should inform you to this effect. Basically, he's saying, will you redeem her? Will you be her redeemer? This redeemer says, I'm willing to redeem. Then Boaz tells this random man, unknown man, he says, great, you the day you buy it from Naomi, you must also buy it from Ruth, the wife of the deceased, and it's in order to perpetuate the name of the deceased on his inheritance. And then that's when this man, the Redeemer that said initially yes, he then changes his mind and says, oh, well, never mind. No, I'm not going to do it, but you can take it over and you can redeem yourself. I'm unable to redeem. You can do it. That does not look so much like something helpful, right? That is the concept of, and by the way, this man is, again, someone who is more a closer relative. It's described as a near kinsman. He is known as, in Torah, right? The Redeemer is what it is in a certain text, but in Hebrew, Poloni Almoni, it actually just means ho such a one, meaning so-and-so. The Torah literally describes this person basically as so-and-so, right? Certain English texts have given this a much loftier name as Redeemer, but it's really just so-and-so as the underneath text there. And so we see here that the man first agrees to redeem the land, then declines once Ruth comes with the package, and then he formally, says, you can do it. You can buy it yourself. So what do we learn here? This is the closed door. This man is closing his own door. And it absolutely looks like a refusal to redeem, but actually clears the single remaining pathway to Boaz. And then that, of course, we know means that that pathway then led to Obed and then Jesse and then King David, right? Um, of these two accounts, right? It is tempting to call these opposites. One helps by giving someone a direction. One helps by removing himself. Oh, yeah, those are opposites, of course. But really, when you think about what a door is, it's the same thing as a door, right? Picture a, picture a corridor of doors. All are shut but one. All are shut but one. Well, that is really the pointing to the door that's open, even though all the closing, there's a whole bunch of doors closed, one open. Really, those doors that are closed are still pointing you to the open door. Right? Of course, no finger is required, but essentially the configuration of the doors themselves, they are directing you, right? Because there's only a single remaining path. And when you look at it that way, it's really indistinguishable from having been pointed there versus arriving there because there's no other door that's open, right? So the two men that we're talking about, one in Joseph's account, one in Ruth's account, they are not opposites. They are just the inverse, but the inverse of one identical endpoint. That is the open hand and the closed hand. That is the open door and the closed door. I will just note here that the closing door concept does not work. Neither of the concepts work, open door, closed door, unless you're willing to keep walking, right? So if you're arriving at a closed door, you won't get to the door that's open if you don't know to keep walking, meaning there is the spirit of Yah Ruach Kodesh is literally leading, guiding, directing, and protecting you, as in that spirit of Yahweh is going to tell you to keep going, right? It's going to tell you to keep going. There's a door that's open. It's okay. That door is closed. That door is closed. There's a door that is open. Same with the pointing, right? If someone gives you directions, they open the door for you by giving you where to go, pointing in a direction. If you don't go there, right? Even after you've been given the directions on how to get to the thing, well, again, it's the same equivalent, meaning both require you to keep walking, and you can do that. Only happens when you are infused with the spirit of Yahweh Kodesh to ensure you're still arriving at the place of redemption. You can also, I talked about it as open hand, closed hand, but you can also just think of it as, okay, the hinges of a door, right? The hinges of a door mean that you can open it or close it, quite literally. You've got a um, a doorway, if you will. That doorway can either have a door on it or not, right? But the dalet represents the doorway. It represents the door. It is telling us that an open door and a closed door are not two different things. They are two states of one thing, which is the door, whether it swings open, which is the man pointing in the Yosef account, or it swings shut, which is the man stepping aside in the Ruth account. What's still there is they were doors. The individuals themselves were the door. One said no, removed himself. The other said, yes, I can help you go over there. The unnamed people are the dalet, the door. And a door has only one purpose. It is to be the threshold you pass through to get to the other side. Again, you might be thinking, well, how does a closed door get me to the other side? Because a closed door means you gotta redirect toward the one that's open. So they serve the same function. Both of these men uh, are, when I say the doors, meaning they are the conduits of the yes or the no, of the help of the no help. But neither of the men are the destination. They both are just randomly sort of there, and they're meant to be passed through, meaning they help guide to the next direction in some way, on the way to redemption in both. But they're nameless because I don't know if anybody has ever walked through a door. If you walk through the door of the White House and then you eventually get to the president and you meet all these important people, well, do you end up leaving thinking, man, what was the name of that door I walked under? You don't. You go into somewhere, you finally get to your destination. You're not thinking, oh, I am so thankful that I walked through that door. Oh, I'm so thankful that door was locked to get me. You're not really thinking about the door, meaning a door isn't meant to be admired. It is quite literally nameless. It is meant to be walked through. And it tells us a lot about this concept of why they're unnamed, beloved. These two men, they're unnamed for a reason, because the door is supposed to be a anonymous, nameless person. Interesting enough, I kept going down this rabbit hole of blessings and realized that Dalet, right, the fourth Hebrew letter, it also is or the same letters that make up Dalet, they also spell Dal. All right, so Dalet is door. What is Dal in Hebrew? It means someone who is poor, someone who is weak, someone who is lowly, someone of no account. Meaning, when you connect those two things, right, what do we learn about the Dalet? Well, traditionally, we see the Dalet as linked to a someone who is humble, standing, at the threshold. You are someone who is humble. If you are known as a humble person, you are also known as Dalet, right? So those two things, when you think about them together, they make sense. Rabia has described the Dalet on the Ark of Yahweh website that is under construction as a door, a gate, and numerically, it has the same numeric value as the salvation of Yahweh. So you can understand then why in Ruth's account, this individual is known as the Redeemer. It's giving us some indication of what they're doing. Although it looks for not, it is for redemption, right? It means, of course, door, lid, to receive, to enter, pathways, described as the nose, entrances and exits, it's access and openings to pass, secret chambers, base of the brain or mind, refuge, means of acquisition, revelation, access to breath from above, access to Yahweh's spirit, door of separation / division, sign of Shabbat as the door of set apartness and rest. Its extended meaning is security or refuge. The numerical value is 4, 40, 400, or 4,000, which points to the work of Yahweh's salvation. We know that there are 4 cups during the Pesach Seder, the festival of salvation. The comments that Rabia has is the Dalet symbolizes the poor man that receives tzedakah, which is charity, from the rich man. The dalet is the door that stands in the opening of the house. Why does the roof of the dalet extend backwards a little to the right, going in the direction of the gimel? So aleph, beit, gimel is 3. And then dalet is 4. And what you have in the depiction of those two letters is, if you look at them side by side, the gimel, the number 3, it looks like is running toward the dalet, the door, right? What do we get from this when we put those two things together? We get that the rich person, that what we should be doing if we are rich, if we are prosperous, we should be running toward the poor person at the door, the gimel. Rich person, the gimel, the rich person 3 is running toward the poor person, the dalet, right? That is how Yahweh has ordered these two things to operate. We have to make sure that if we have, we are giving to those that do not have, and that should be something that we run towards them to do, right? And so, spiritually, that's what these things, or depiction-wise, that's what these things represent. And last thing I will say is when you look at the letters, you will see that the dalet is turned, even though the gimel is running toward the dalet, 3 running toward the 4, you will see that the dalet is actually turned, the face of it, the beginning of it is turned toward, away from the gimel, meaning even though the rich person is supposed to be running toward the poor person to give, the poor person should hide their face, and that is to ensure that they don't have shame in that receiving of the gifts, right? It is shameful to be poor. And so when you are poor and impoverished, if you are constantly having to, tell the whole world I'm poor, right? Identifying yourself, it's shameful. So you may never ask, right? So we learn that just in those two letters themselves. And so if the dalet is, we can understand how the dalet is combined with this concept of, yes, a door, but it's somebody who's humble, right? Well, this is the exact kind of person that Yahweh is telling us that redemptive acts tend to hinge on, right? Redemption usually occurs through this type of person, a dalet, right? It is someone who's nameless in the field, which was what we saw in Joseph's account. It's someone who is so-and-so at the city gate. That's the individual in the account of Ruth. But we see it in more places. We see it in 2 Kings 5. And this in Torah, Tanakh, this is just known, it's described as it was a captive servant girl. That's how scripture refers to this individual. We see her very briefly, but it was this captive servant girl who is in a foreign general's house. And this person simply points out where the folks should go to receive healing, right? We're talking about the folks that had, I believe, leprosy, if I'm not mistaken. And this individual is the one who says, oh, go to the prophet. He's over there and he'll set the healing in motion. And we don't ever see her again, but it's a connection between death and life, because the prophet then again sets the healing in motion for what this disease was that was spreading. What are we learning? We are learning not to overlook the poor, the weak, the people who are seemingly unimportant. Why? because even though they may look unimportant, they are the ones that are often the very door through which everything passes. We don't see in the account of Joseph this unidentified man. It doesn't say, and the man was rich and no, it's just an unknown person, right? You can think about these types of people when you're thinking about just think about the before we had directions on our phones, right? But when you had to actually print out a map quest and you got to ask someone where something is, and that person can lead you to the place or lead you off the beaten pathway, right? They're there in that moment on the street. They say it's over there, and you think nothing of them, but they're the ones who are holding the keys to redemption. That's the open door. Also, closed door concept is you're trying to do something. You get and actually in the account of Ruth, it was a yes and then a no. So it's actually an open door that then became a closed door. And so you can think about that in your lives as well. Somebody says yes to something and it's great. Then the flow of Yahweh changes that for important reasons. So then it becomes a no, and you can think, man, that sucks. Let me give up. Or you can spend so much time on the person that said no and thinking that was a bad thing. But what we learn in the account of Ruth is that open door that then became closed actually still led to redemption because it led to the only person Yahweh wanted the door to really be, which was Boaz. Boaz, we learn, is the um, between Boaz and Ruth, right? Them two coming together as one. That then creates the linkage for King David. Go a little bit deeper. How many generations are there from Boaz to David? Boaz, Obed, Jesse, David. the door, the door of Boaz led to the door of David. It's 4 generations between Ruth and Boaz and King David. Want to take it even further? Well, what is the how do you spell David in Hebrew? It is a dalet. In the middle is a vav, and on the end it is a dalet. So the vav is in the middle of 2 doors, right? We've got a dalet, vav, and a dalet. So David's name opens with a door and it closes with a door with a connecting hook, a vav, right? The letter that means and, it's the letter that means something is continuous. It is a letter that means joining, right? Things. It is a letter that means past, present, and future happening in oneness. 2 doors that are bound together. Well, you think about this as the open door in Bereshit and the closed door in Ruth. The open door in Bereshit, the open hand of the gentleman who said, yes, let me help you, go that way with Joseph. The closed door in Ruth of the person who decides, no, I'm not going to help Ruth, this unnamed person, created David, who has an opened and a closed door in his name, meaning a dalet at the beginning, a dalet at the end. And then when you look at how many generations are between what we read in the account of Joseph and in the account of Ruth, well, that is 14. the connections there are, I can keep going, but I'm not. But the open door and the closed door aren't competing, they aren't rivals. They were both dalets. They both are dalets. They're both doors. They both were the doors that formed the name David, that formed David, that created David, who has those two dalets in his name. You can expand that to King David. We know him to be, of course, the king in the Torah, the greatest king of all of ancient Israel. And what do we also know? That's his opening act. That's the first door. But what do we also know him as? We know King David as he will return when the Mashiach returns. He will be king of Israel again, right? Meaning someone with the exact same MO as King David in Torah, in ancient Torah, who came at the beginning of the opening act of salvation, is gonna come at the end of this world. King David is gonna help close the door on this chapter of the world. As in open door to closed door. That will eventually lead to never having to open any other doors, because it will be the world to come, which will be everlasting, which will not have an ending. I'm going to just give you a few other examples of these unnamed people. With Yaakov, do you remember when he wrestled with the angel? Do you remember how that is described as in Torah? It's described as it's just a man. In fact, this one goes even deeper, because it's described as a man, no name. And Yaakov actually asks this no named person, he said, well, what is your name? And he didn't give him his name still. We see it again with Pharaoh. You all remember the unnamed woman who is the daughter of Pharaoh, who lifts our future redeemer, the future redeemer, Moshe, out of the water and raises him in the house built to destroy him. That is also someone unnamed. Now, again, you can, in tradition, in Hebraic thought, folks who go deeper, they're searching for who all these people, the names of who these folks are. And so we know in Hebraic thought, what is not revealed in the text, folks try and get revealed. So we know this Pharaoh's daughter commonly as Batya, but the text doesn't actually name her, right? So she fits in the same category. And then we have with Abraham and Lot. We see this once again. In Abraham's account, we see him opening the door, right, to three men who stood by him, meaning three men who were wondering, who need some hospitality. He runs. It talked about the Gimel running toward the Dalet. We see this in action with Avraham. He quite literally runs toward the three men who are in need, runs toward them and brings them in. It's the Gimel hurrying to the Dalet, the giver racing to give to those in need. We see in the next chapter with Lot, we see actually something fascinating. Lot opens the door just like his relative Avraham. He opens the door to those same two of those three unnamed individuals. Lot steps opens the door for them. And then we see something interesting. He then steps outside to talk to the mob that are trying to get those two unnamed people that entered. So he steps outside and shuts the door. He's outside. And then we see something where the angels that are inside, right, or excuse me, the individuals who are on the inside, they force the door open to bring Lot back inside before the mob kills them, and they shut the door again. Meaning it's a whole bunch of doors being open and shut, quite literally, in Abraham's account between Abraham himself and Lot. But those are all unnamed people. So, what do we gather from all of this? All of these doors and all of these unnamed people operating, throughout Torah. Well, you have to notice, right, that in Torah, angels never have names, right? We know of the angels that exist in, again, Hebraic thought, but they actually don't exist, or excuse me, the names of those angels don't exist in the text. Okay, we know of Gabriel, the angel, we know of Michael, the angel, but they don't exist in the text of certainly these accounts. Maybe some of them appear later, but never in these accounts, right? The Torah doesn't name angels. Even when they're cornered, like with the one that was with Yaakov, right? It says that the angel doesn't answer, and I'm getting to the answer of who all of these people are, right? The reason why we don't know of any names of angels is the same reason why we can clearly glean that each of these places where the individual is not named, it tells us that they are an angel in some way. It tells us that they are a messenger in some way, which is really all an angel means, right? The Hebrew word for angel, malachim, is the plural, malach is the singular. That simply means messenger, right? A messenger. And so we are able to glean from this that Yahweh doesn't want them named because they're there to serve a function. They're there to just be a messenger, serve a function, and they aren't named because it tells us something about the act that they're doing, right? Yahweh doesn't want them named because he wants these moments to be pointed back to the one who sent the message, Father Yahweh. He's saying the esteem is not with the angel, the esteem is with Yahweh, myself. They are just the ones doing the task, but point people, when you're doing redemption work, point people to Father Yahweh, right? The esteem belongs to the one who sent it, not to the one who's sort of the messenger of it. It means that there's something that's about credit that must be only given to Yahweh when doing this work. Why does Yahweh need credit? No, but it's about making sure that the people who are doing redemption work, you get in a territory where people can very easily think, well, let me start worshiping you because you guided me here. And if for example, all these unnamed people, if they started puffing themselves up to say it was me, well, if you're the one that stands in the door, you are the doorway, you're the path between salvation or not, which all these unnamed people are. If Joseph, once again, didn't see this man, he would have been still lost. The man points him in the direction. It looks like it's not redemption because he is then thrown into a pit. But what happens, that needed to happen with his brothers in order to bring about redemption. The same is true with in the account of Boaz and with all of these others. If they all became the people that we focused on, well, if you're in the moment, you might think, well, let me start pledging my allegiance to the door, to the person that helped lead the pathway here. But Yahweh doesn't want that, hence why he doesn't name any of these individuals, the messengers that are operating in human bodies, angels operating in human bodies. That shouldn't be confusing if we can think of Yahweh coming in the form of a human who we know as Yahshua. Yes, Yahweh also manifests his angels in the form of humans to help and lead and guide and direct people you will never see again, people you will never meet again, people you probably don't even remember, but they play a central purpose. It is the angel refusing, the messengers refusing, the ones redeeming, refusing to become the central figures. It tells us something about how Yahweh wants us to show up as ourselves when we do this work. He says, be like the Malachim, the angels, the unnamed people in all of these accounts. Don't try and do this work of helping to get honor. Be functional. Act as though you're just doing the task, the function. Act as if you're just running an errand. You know, people that go and run errands. Like think of what are the DoorDash folks? All right, you pull up DoorDash or one of these apps, and you get somebody to order you stuff, and they bring it to you. Do you remember those people's names? I mean, nobody's thinking about the names of the DoorDash people and remembering them and thinking they're central to the story. Okay, well, in a similar way, metaphorically, Yahweh has these types of people in critical moments for us, either telling us no and shutting a door, or telling us yes and opening a door. Both are doors. Yahweh has these people in our lives in these ways, and he's saying he also wants us to mimic this behavior when we are doing redemptive work. Not about ego. All credit goes to Yahweh. Well, we then see what this all mirrors up to. And this is where I said, wow, all this from Yahuditya mentioning the no-name person on her message. I then thought, after all that, I thought I was done. And Yahweh said, one last piece. He says, when you think of tzedakah, which is charity, right? What is one of the highest levels of giving charity? One of the highest levels of giving charity we learn is when neither the giver nor the receiver knows each other. It is a no-name person. It is anonymous, fully anonymous. It is a double blind, type of anonymous. So Yahweh is saying, if you're the giver, your generous gift, you should not be ascribing a name to it. If you are the receiver, well, you shouldn't need to show who you are either, so you're not feeling shame. Why is the nameless gift thought about so high in the levels of charity, of tzedakah? There are 8, by the way. So this one is number 7 of the the 7th of 8. I'm not going to get into what the 8th is, but this one is 7th of 8, meaning when you do charity like this, when you do giving like this, where the person doesn't know that you are the giver and the receiver doesn't, and then you don't know the receiver. When you do it like this, what's the reason why the no name part is so important? Well, all of the esteem can only run upwards to Yahweh. That's it. It's that the only person that knows what happened there is Yahweh, as in the only thing that that individual on both ends can think about as they think about that gift in the future is they can only say, if you're the giver, oh, well, Yahweh, you know who this person is. I pray that this person is blessed with it. And thank you for giving me the opportunity. If you're the receiver, you're saying, Yahweh, I have no idea who this was, but thank you so much for putting that this individual or this organization or what have you in my life. But both of the ends are reflecting back to Yahweh. Both are just seeing themselves as um, when we think about what that doorway was, right? It is um, anonymous, right? The person, both people really disappeared. Um, and so, bottom line, open door or closed door, Yahweh is saying, don't focus on it so much. It's just the sign, but focus on the qualities underneath it because this is how I want you to do this work, right? Don't try and focus on who the name person, who was the person. Let me try and do my research. That's not the point in this sense of it. It is focus on what are the underlying qualities of these individuals, right? And what I will say about the individual in Ruth's account, what you know of him is, it says in verse 5 that he did not want to uh, perpetuate the name of the deceased on his inheritance. And so, if you want to get one step deeper, which I will for just a second, this individual received a measure for measure uh, punishment, if you will, or accountability, better way of saying it, meaning because he did not want to do the thing that was about redeeming someone else's name, or excuse me, perpetuating someone else's name, which was, the about connected to Ruth and the inheritance. Well, Torah removed that person's name. So if you want to go one layer deeper, you can, but you could just keep it at the layer that we're at, which is this individual was closing a door and it still acted as redemption, just as the one opening. But there's a measure for measure piece, as in, well, if you didn't want to continue this person's name, well, I'm going to ensure that your name is blotted out. Oppositely, you want to be boastful about who your name is, because that's what this person basically is doing here. They're saying, well, no, I don't want to do it because I want my name. It's going to mess up my name. Well, Yahweh then says, well, your name's not going to be it in any way. You're still a redeemer. You still helped, but it, his redemption, right? It's like what Yahweh, what Hasatan meant for evil, Yahweh turned to good, or the trap that Haman, the gallows that Haman put up, he himself fell into. We see those still as acts of redemption that occurred. One might be positive as open, one might be negative as closed, but they're all doors. And for all of us, as we are now moving into the the uh, uh, the first fruits of our harvest, as in we have been doing a lot of building, and now internally we've been building our character, we've been building ourselves. What makes this so poignant as we stepped out of the desert moment and now going into the direction of, um, Yahweh literally putting us in the hallway of doors. Right? You can think of it as going out of the desert and into the city that has a whole bunch of doors. Yeah, we're in the hallway of doors, and Yahweh is saying the reason why he's pulling this out of the Ruth account for us is he is saying, um, think about a moment in your life that felt like a closed door, right? A refusal, a loss, a no. And then think how that eventually turned out to be the only thing that opened the right path. He's saying, remember that because I'm going to put closed doors in front of you. And you've just built your character so that you know what to do when you get a closed door. It's to use your discernment, it's to be persistent, it's to endure, it's to keep walking because Yahweh is saying, I closed that door. I'm the one who closed that door because it wasn't the right one for you to enter. And don't worry, it's going to lead to the open door. But both were still of my doing. He's saying, if you happen to enter through a door and then you get a reversal and someone kicks you out, or is a no, it's an open door that a no. Yahweh's saying, don't worry, that's from me. Don't try and enter back through the door. Go to the next one. He's also saying, as a human being, you are going to open doors for yourself. It doesn't all work like a game where Yahweh's opening doors and closing doors. He's saying you're going to need to create doors, for example. You're going to need to walk in and out of them. Like Moshe at some point Yahweh had to tell Moshe, you've got to walk through the door. I'm not opening it for you. You open it yourself. You close it behind you yourself, meaning wants us to lead in some of the respects along our journey. When that happens, he's saying, just like he did with Lot, you may go out a door and you may think, all right, I'm going to be able to handle this on my own, this mob on my own. I'm going to shut the door, open the door, I'm going to shut the door behind me. And then he's saying, well, good, but I know what's up ahead. This mob is about to devour you. So I am going to send my angel now to break down the door and pull you back in. Or, better way of saying it, if Yahweh removes you from something, a door that you walked in, Yahweh says it was great. It's all part of Yahweh's plan. And then all of a sudden you get removed from something. You get removed from somewhere. Well, Yahweh's saying, don't see that as anything but my redemption still taking place, even though it might look like it is bad. And then he's saying, as we walk out to do these, to the in our full self as new people with the revelation knowledge of Mount Sinai, he's saying you do the work of being redeemers as well, but not redeemers puffing your chest up, saying, "Look at what I've done over here." He's saying, be anonymous in your redemptive work. Try to be, not everything's going to end up working that way, of course. If you are, you are faced with a moment of tzedakah, and the only way you can do it is by revealing who you are, well, of course, that's better than not doing it at all. But if you have the ability to be anonymous yourself, and then ensure that the receiver doesn't know you, you don't know the receiver doesn't know you. He's saying, do that. Don't do a thing because you need to be seen, because then you will be like a actual angel, a malakim. You're serving the function of a messenger, and you're ensuring that the credit and the honor and the praise and the esteem can only flow upward to Father Yahweh through his son Yahshua and by the power of his spirit, Yahuwah Kodesh. Yosef never learned the name of the man in this field. Boaz, his whole town forgot the name of the man at the gate, meaning no name on his own account. But what we know is that those moments were about redemption and the people who were eventual redeemers being born. And Yahweh says, walking is what is most important. You continuing to walk in his image and likeness is what's important, whether it be the door that is closed or a door that is opened. I say amen and amen. May you all have a blessed week ahead, a Shavua Tov, and I will see everybody for our Shabbat next week. And also, if you have your Rabia is very known to do this, and I always forget, and I'm remembering to do it now. If you have not been able to give a tithe offering or love gift to the Ark of Yahweh, you should, because the reason this is known as the Feast of First Fruits is Yahweh wants us, as soon as we are coming out of the season of the wilderness, right? And we now are going to be guided and directed into the various directions Yahweh will have us go in. He wants us to sacrifice and give toward the institutions and the places that have helped create the new version of who we are, as in it starts in the spiritual realm. If it is not to the Ark of Yahweh, then it should be to somewhere, because the act of a tithe or an offering is significant in this transition period from the desert, right, from the wilderness to the city or the field or the gate. And you can do so if you've got a phone and you take a picture of what's on your screen, which is a QR code. You can do so there. That is unfortunately the only way you can do it right now, because our website is still under construction, but praise Yahweh, it will be back up and running soon. And as I said, have a blessed week, and I'll see everybody next week.